Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Technician follows an incorrect process sheet given by an engineer, resulting in scrap parts. Engineer refuses to listen and insists on following the sheet. The second story. Business partner Mark accepted investment for their new venture, but didn't honor their agreement. Mark's attorney tried to scare the partner, who found out that Mark accepted the money into a different company, committed wire fraud. The third story. Workers at a store are annoyed by resellers swarming around their carts to buy good items, so they start implementing social distancing guidelines and only put out items when customers are respectful. On to the first story. Just follow the process sheet. Don't contact me again. Okay, prepare for scrap parts. I work as a technician in a lens manufacturing facility. My usual job is actually in R&D, and I work to help create the processes for new products, so I know my way around all the machines used, from start to end in fabrication. And I know a lot about how processes should go to ensure the product is made correctly and to spec. Cue the shop floor requesting assistance on a project that has to get done ASAP, and shop machine utilization is already at 150%. This isn't an uncommon occurrence, and if our small department can help, we do. Usually I'm asked to use the R&D machines to run parts in a particular step of the process, but this week they wanted a full start to finish on about 100 pieces of glass. I get the banks in and review the process sheet and find a myriad of glaring errors. The tolerances are way off, dimensions are called out wrong, someone wrote this up hastily and it was clearly not a developed and tested process. I halt production immediately before even touching a single piece of glass, and go to the engineer who's called out on the process sheet to discuss the issue. Now, I've worked with many of the engineers in the building, as most of them have worked with my department to refine their project processes. I don't know this guy at all. I go through the proper channels and schedule a consult meeting with him, a 15-minute meeting technicians can use to talk to engineers and managers about work when a production halt is called. He ignores the meeting. I hunt him down on foot and find him in his office where he proceeds to lecture me on interrupting him. I'm a lowly technician, he's an engineer. The process is correct. Follow it or it's my A. I'd like to note at this time that I don't work for his department. He has no effect over me in my command structure, and I'm essentially doing him and the related project manager a favor by allowing them to feed me this work. Now, normally when getting an incorrect process sheet like this, the solution is to inform the engineer, at which point they'll say, "Oh yeah, I effed up. Just make it to spec. I'm sure you know what to do and I'll fix the paperwork." But I was told to follow the sheet. I tell my boss about my interaction with the engineer, and my boss tells me to email the engineer and get to follow the sheet in writing, then to follow their instructions to the letter. I email the engineer and he goes ballistic via email. He even wrote, "Look, I have a PhD in optics. I don't need a tech with an associate's degree telling me how to do my job. Follow the process sheet, do not deviate." You got it. Not a single part met spec. I documented the case and my boss signed off on it. When the project failed to meet deadline because a process review was ordered, the engineer tried to throw me and my department under the bus. I had the production halt documentation, the engineer's email, and my boss's backing. Things did not go well. Edit. The engineer kept his job, but I heard there were some serious reprimands that came his way. The project, with not some high-priority, expensive job, and the material cost of the company was comparatively low compared to the eventual income. I think the biggest issue was the waste of time and labor expenses. My hourly billable is a bit higher than the shop floor technicians to get the job done. Furthermore, there was a strongly worded email about how communication between the shop technicians and engineers should be a priority to ensure quality and efficiency. Also, I think training on interpersonal respect regardless of position was issued. The next story is, that time the company lawyers told me to contact law enforcement. This took place years ago but still makes me laugh at the sheer stupidity of it all. It starts as all truly great sagas published on the internet begin, when I met a random guy through a friend at a bar in the city. Let's call the guy I met Mark for the purpose of this post. My friend had introduced me to Mark because for a few years leading up to that introduction, I shared an idea I had for a business with anyone who would listen. I was told Mark wanted to start his own business, had worked in the industry, knew a lot about the subject matter required, and thought my idea was good. Mark and I met up for a lunch. We hit it off. He said he'd start the business as the CEO, and agreed to me taking a part-time operational role. I agreed to help solely in a part-time operational role because I couldn't afford to quit my day job. I put in 15% of the cash for 5% ownership, Since Mark was going to put in founder hours, 80 plus hours a week, and agreed to put up 85% of the cash, which was more money than I could afford to risk on a new venture. I worked part-time. I did what I said I would do. I even tried to be of assistance on things I had no experience with. I connected Mark with a fella I had done business with before. We will call him Paul. Paul and I got into a dispute ourselves. More on this later. Anyway, let's fast forward a few months and I got into a dispute with Mark over stationery. Yes, stationery not being to his liking caused him to flip out. This was despite him picking the stationery out. Next up, the contract I got from Mark was not what we agreed. The legal work required a few months to get done, and I had expected delays, but when I finally got it, the paperwork didn't represent what I had agreed to own. Not only that, but my investment wasn't being acknowledged under the terms we had committed to when I put the money in. Now, as I said, I wasn't able to risk much and I only invested what I could afford to lose, so this wasn't a huge sum of money. I didn't want to make a big deal about it since the amount was small, and he began promising a new contract when the business could pay for the lawyers to make changes. I signed nothing. Then it worsened. Mark and I started to fight any time we're in a room together. As I think back, it's almost comical how angry he would be in my presence. I have other things to do with my time than squabble over stuff like stationery, so I worked on my areas of the business and hoped things would grow. I stopped in whenever I could and would help out regularly as needed with as little Mark interaction as possible. Paul would intervene sometimes when Mark would get particularly difficult to be around. Anyway, fast forward about 2 years, and Mark can't help but tell everyone who will listen that the business is going well. I have no idea how well things are going because Mark isn't giving me any updates. I get a call around Christmas from Mark. He wishes me a happy holiday, then drops the bomb on me that he wants to terminate my involvement and refund my investment. I decline the investment refund and say I'm happy to no longer work with him. In my head, I think it's kinda hilarious that he thinks this will just end that easily, but I say nothing to that accord to him. Mark and I hang up with him aggravated about my refusal to take the refund on my investment. Mark then sends me an email that I had resigned. This had no basis in fact, but certainly was creative about what we had just discussed. I correct him immediately in a reply stating that he wanted to no longer work together, and that I can see that being the case but want to discuss my investment. A few days later, Mark demands I come pick up a check for a reimbursement of my investment. I do not come and get it. Next thing you know, the company attorney huffs and puffs and tries to scare me with some strongly worded letter. This is the same idiot attorney who screwed up my contract to work on the business, and my investment agreement. Let's call this attorney Mr. Cohn for the sake of this story. I send an email response to Mr. Cohn that he screwed up. The company seems to be doing well, that I hear rumors about how well, that I want to be on this for the foreseeable future, and I will not take a one-to-one cash out for what I put in. The attorney then emails me back, stating in writing that Mark never accepted my electronic transfer into the company account. Instead, Mark has another company he accepted the money into, a company I've never heard of, a company that is different than the name of the recipient on my electronic transfer, a company that would be committing wire fraud to accept the money I sent. On that note, I did some sleuthing online. I found out Mark had been forming one company every month or two. Then there were media reports and documents he let slip in shared drives he forgot I had access to, from when we agreed to work together. Mark was too cheap and stupid to pay for tech help, so he was using my shared folders I had created, and I certainly wasn't obligated to turn off the shares if he wanted to work out of them. Those documents showed me Mark had recently raised money in the company I sent the payment to at 200 times the valuation I had bought into it at, and Mark didn't disclose my investment to the new investors. Mark had, however, put me on documents showing my ownership to previous investors. Not on documents I had ever seen before, but documents he had been sending around. When I share my suspicions that Mark is committing wire fraud with Mr. Cohn, and I am told I'm the one breaking the law by knowing anything about the investment documents the company is used. Mr. Cohn tells me that by not picking up my check, I will not be entitled to any money, and to contact law enforcement if I think something illegal is happening. He cautions, though, that I'll be the one in trouble. Cue the MC. I let the different respective members of the Securities and Exchange Commission along with law enforcement know what happened to me. I provided them all the documents I had from the matter. It took about 5 years for the investigation to conclude, for charges to be brought, for a trial to conclude, and for Mark to go to jail. They say government is slowing, but they aren't kidding with just how slow. Maybe it was slow because Mark was running a large, tens of millions of dollars large fraud. Anyway, Mark will be serving time for about 30 felony charges they found uncovering the details of his Ponzi scheme. He will be away for a long time. I never did anything wrong. With the information I was able to provide, Mr. Cohn ended up getting disbarred. There were other things Mr. Cohn did outside of what is shared in this post that I cannot share, or it could help to identify me the folks involved. The investigators credited me with bringing the fraud to their attention. I lost my money in this ordeal but gained an education, and I got to help bring down a crook. The sheer stupidity of Mark is that he didn't even follow the business plan I had. He just used it as a story to convince investors to give him money. It is a business model that works very well. It took a few more years, but I'm now in a position to be pursuing this business full-time, with people of high integrity, who all work together to ensure each other's success. We expect to have an extremely profitable year in 2023, after proving the business model worked in 2022. The last story is Goodwill Hunters. I work at one of the more popular chain thrift stores processing and putting out electrical. Usually we bring product out twice a day. The first time we usually bring our cart out, go to lunch, and then put everything on the shelves when we get back. This helps get rid of at least 20% of the work we have to do. Mind you, we have signs that state customers aren't supposed to even be within 6 feet of the cart for safety purposes. We sometimes have to Tetris SH to get everything we processed on there, and it can get a bit sketchy. And it also makes our job more difficult putting product out if they actively look at our cart, which is why we bring it out early. My cart's usually well organized and free of hazard, and usually they help, so why not let people shop if they're being respectful? Well, we have people who come to the store at those times specifically to poach good items to resell them. We have a lot of respectful regulars, whom I have actually built bonds with, but some of the non-consistent regulars are a nightmare. Examples: when you try to roll the rack onto the floor, they swarm you and start grabbing items, making it impossible to move, calling out what items they want and fighting with others. One guy even jumped on the rack to get something before someone else. Now, I'm not shy or timid, but I am pretty reserved and usually have a carefree attitude, but this SH was annoying. So I started just telling them to let me park before they go at it. 2 out of 10. Had my coworker who used to do security come out with me, where he told everyone to back off while I rolled the cart. 9 out of 10, but he wasn't always available, and it rightfully made me look like a bee. So there I was. I needed to be self-dependent. It only happened properly about half the time, and I didn't want to lose out on making my job easier, but also was just fed up. Then I had it. I roll my cart out like normal. If it's a good day, I leave my cart out and go to lunch. If it's not, well, they have one chance. If I say, let me park first, and they don't listen, I roll my cart right back into the back, but not very far. Just inside so they can see the product still if they look through the window or as people walk in and out. Then when it's time to roll product, I calmly ask everyone to read and follow the signs. Then they start swarming me as I put items away. I politely remind them that during these times, I respectfully ask they maintain our social distancing guidelines. Then they started waiting at the section for the product they wanted most. But since they were there, I wouldn't dare dream of breaking my social distancing boundaries. So some stuff just didn't get put out. Even though they'd see me walking to the area, item in hand, see them, turn around and put it back on my cart. If I can't put everything out in a timely manner, it goes back with me. If they really want it, they'll have another shot to act right when I come out again, in 3 hours. Edit. There's been times they just wait until the next day. If they want it that bad, someone else will buy it immediately, and I'd rather it go to someone who actually wants the item, not just to resell. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.